1, 2, 3, Folks, I have to admit to you, I am thoroughly confused. I thought there was supposed to be a third debate this week between Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull, and that was going to take place online. Now, like you, I was very excited about this, and I stayed up all night watching my MySpace page. And nothing happened. It was actually really totes boring. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe it was on another social media site. Perhaps I shouldn't have ignored all those LinkedIn emails I've been getting. And then I thought, of course I should have. It's LinkedIn. Then I thought maybe the debate was being hosted on Snapchat. And that'd be great. That'd be perfect, because every time they announced a policy, it would instantly disappear and there wouldn't have to be any arguing about it. Labor would absolutely love it. In the end, I just watched a bunch of cute animal videos. Because I'm happy. It's important to embrace new media if the parties want to get their message out there. Sadly, the old hands-on approach just doesn't work anymore, as recently disendorsed Liberal candidate for Cornwall and qualified masseuse John Sue discovered when his party discovered that he owned the Victoria Angels brothel escort agency in Frankston. So, name was probably a bit of a giveaway. I mean, that sort of in-your-face one-on-one or two-on-one interaction isn't necessary anymore with new media. For example, the Northern Territory Sports Minister, Nathan Barrett, is a big fan of new media, having recently sent to a constituent via Facebook videos of himself masturbating with his left hand. You see, it's that sort of personal touch that's missing from politics today. Now, obviously, you can't do that with every member of your electorate, although the Herald Sun did point out that they were short videos. Speaking for myself, I prefer the old-fashioned way. Politicians getting out there on the hustings and just talking to the voters. That's why I miss not hearing more from Micallefs during this election. The Liberal Minister for Employment and Women, and the only senator capable of being lip-read from over a kilometre away, has a way with words which never fails to hold a crowd spellbound. As when she spoke at this group of truckies not so long ago about her own hopes and dreams.
I don't want to be an employee driver. I want to run my own business. I want to take out a mortgage on my house. I want to purchase one of these beautiful rigs that we see here today. And I want to be my own boss.
Yeah, so look out, Mr. Turnbull, for a number of reasons. And she's a great communicator, though. See, she even over-enunciates her body language. Now, the Lib's Chris German has also turned his back on social media. He put his involvement with the failed web-based Shutterbug Millionaire competition on hold after it went into voluntary administration to run for the seat of McEwen. So nothing wrong at all with old media, even if it's just standing in a still photograph of yourself next to still photographs of yourself. And why not? An 8-week campaign is physically draining. Candidates need to preserve their energy, look after their voice and be economical with their language. For example, just for fun, see if you can pick the 2 words Bill Shorten could have left out of this sentence.
We will not be a big spending government.
See, and because he did use the words big spending, he let himself open there for a massive slapdown from Matthias Cormann.
You can see the pigs fly.
It loses something in the translation, doesn't it? But you do have to admire Bill's energy. Last week he did double duty at Sky's People's Forum and debated himself furiously. When Mr Turnbull didn't turn up, Mr Turnbull preferred to do a sales conference instead. Still, Malcolm wasn't above a little double duty himself. Usually if a politician doesn't want to answer an interviewer's question, he or she just avoids it. What they don't do is invite the interviewer to ask the question they intend to avoid.
What those polls tell you is that there's something that you're doing which they don't like.
Well, why don't you ask me a question about it?
Well, I am asking you a question about what do you think? What do you think has happened that you have lost that ginormous chunk of approval?
Lee, I'm not going to be drawn into that kind of introspection.
Obviously, Malcolm went in with a list of questions he was going to avoid, and he was going to make damn sure he avoided them, even if he wasn't asked any. Good on him. But how did Bill go, debating himself furiously? Well, while he was generally considered the winner of the first town hall debate, this time people were much less certain of the outcome. He does tend to do much better when there's someone to compare him with. It's like if you just drank Canotto all the time. You'd think it was terrible. Whereas if you occasionally have a sip of sump oil from the drip tray under your car, you'd appreciate it a bit more. Into the bin. Now, Now, the other thing to remember is that with a People's Forum, the questions were easier, but the number of people watching was quite small, whereas with 7:30 the questions were harder, but the audience was actually bigger. So, in a sense, Bill Shorten chose Family Feud, while Malcolm Turnbull chose Millionaire Hot Seat, which seems only appropriate. But we're getting to the pointy end of this election run-up, so watch out or you could lose an eye. In fact, Bill Shorten is hosting the official Labor Party campaign launch this Sunday. Now, that's a tough call for Labor supporters. Do they attend the launch or do they stay at home and watch repeats of Death Comes to Pemberley and Shaun Micallefs Mad as Hell on ABC One? Or repeats of Spicks and Specks, Seconds from Disaster, The Daters, Michael McIntyre's Comedy Roadshow, Louis Theroux, Law and Disorder in Philadelphia, Diary of a Teenage Virgin, and never mind the Buzzcocks on ABC2. Or the repeats of Operation Ouch, Degrassi, The Next Generation, Girls in Love and House of Anubis on ABC3. Or the repeats of Australia-wide Insiders, 1+1 and Planet America on ABC News 24. Anyway, it's about time he did it. In my view, According to our own mad-as-hell election date blackboard, there are only how many days to go before the big day?
17 days, 17 days. Hurry up, hurry up.
Yes, quite right, Blackboard. I can't wait either. But Ian Orbspite, a professor of theoretical physics and advanced quantum mechanics at Box Hill TAFE, with a little over a fortnight before the election, is it possible to launch something that's already 3/4 of the way through its journey?
Yes, it is, Shaun, but only if you posit, as Gödel does, that space-time is curved.
Oh, almighty Thor, take him now!
After all, Shaun, the coalition government have proved that time travel is possible in their election ad by showing us Bill Shorten in 2012 endorsing their 2016 corporate tax cuts. And they do frequently, do they not, refer to the Gillard sandwich government between two slices of Kevin Rudd.
2 slices of Kevin Rudd?
Well, he was bred in Queensland.
So on June 19th, at the launch, what happens? Apart from all the former Labor Prime Ministers giving Bill Shorten a standing ovation while actually wanting to hide under their seats.
Well, Professor Shaun, in order to successfully launch their campaign, the ALP will have to transport us back to before the start of it, which will mean, theoretically, that we'll have to go through those 4 weeks all over again.
Oh, God. And how could that possibly help Labor?
Well, it would enable them to get David Feeney out of the country.
Why don't they travel forward in time to after the election, beyond the forward estimates, to, say, a decade in the future, so we could see how their 10-year economic plan went?
I suspect that might not be in Labor's best interest, Shaun.
Thank you very much, Ian. Now, the budget deficit, government debt, spending, company tax cuts, super, are all complicated issues that we don't understand. And when I say we, I'm including many of our politicians. Yet it's these same improperly grasped policies that will very likely most influence you when you step into that cardboard urinal on July 2. And who better to help us misunderstand these things less than mad as hell's own Financy Boy? Unfortunately, Financy Boy cannot be with us here tonight because we'd get complaints. So I'll explain the confusion as best I can. First up, government debt. Now, Labor apparently has a 10-year plan to deal with it, while the government has a 10-year plan to deal with it. Labor says that the deficit needs to get bigger before we get back to surplus, much in the way that when you were a kid, your father made you smoke an entire packet of cigarettes to make sure you never tried it again. Whereas the Libs say we have to reduce the deficit and decrease spending to make the economy stronger, much in the way that bloodletting, a patient in medieval times by a barber, would sometimes cure them of the plague. Ultimately, they're heading for the same destination from different directions. In fact, they're really on the same road. In fact, in the same lane, heading for each other, at least as far as the Libs are concerned. Malcolm Turnbull has said that Bill Shorten was absolutely right when he said company tax cuts would deliver greater productivity and investment, more jobs and higher wages back in 2011. The Labs say, though, that the fiscal situation has changed since 2011 and that the coalition actually voted against the company tax cuts at the time. Advisor to the PM, Belinda Crumpet, have the PM's words come back to bite you on the hand that feeds him?
Oh, Shaun, anything can sound unfair if you put it back into context.
But if tax cuts for companies are such a good idea, why did you oppose them 5 years ago?
Well, to use Labor's own word, things were different fiscally back then.
But why does context matter now but not back then?
Well, it just depends.
On what?
On who? If it's us, context doesn't matter now, but it did back then. If it's Labor, it never mattered at all.
As far as you're concerned?
Of course, as far as we're concerned. You think we care about what was happening when we weren't in power?
We seem perfectly happy to bag on ad nauseum about Labor's economic mismanagement when they were in power, except for this one thing which you say is absolutely right, despite the fact that you stopped them from doing it. Aren't you obliged to be consistent on these things?
Not all the time.
But is the Libs' criticism of what the Labs are saying now about their 10-year plan fair and reasonable? Let's analyse this tweet they put out. First of all, they say it's not a plan, it's a pamphlet. That's the sort of line you'd expect from some half-assed comedy show. But is what Mr Abbott is clutching really a plan for the future of this country, or is it a pamphlet? Yes, he's very good, isn't he? Secondly, they say that Labor's plan contains less words and more photos than Taylor Swift's new album. Is that right, Taylor Swift impersonator Chi-Chi Mozilla?
I don't think so, Shaun. Shouldn't it be contains fewer words?
Oh, it's social media.
Shaun, if they're comparing it to Tay-Tay's deluxe album, then the liner notes are pretty extensive. But if you compare Labor's 10-year plan with what was in the original CD, Labor has the bigger word count for shiz.
American musicians are notoriously sensitive to their music being used in political campaigns without their permission. How do you think Taylor would feel about her liner notes being used in this way?
I think she'd be like totally cray about it, Shaun. T-Swizzle loves getting an award, and for a government in another country to recognise her liner notes as an effective way to solve their economic problems would be like a total honour for her. I only hope Kanye doesn't open his big fat stupid mouth and shit on her parade again, you know?
Yeah, I hear you, sister.
Hey, do you want me to do my parody version of We're Never Ever Getting Back Together about Labor and the Greens now?
No. I'm good. Now, as this picture suggests, and this one, the Treasurer, Scott Morrison, is a man who enjoys sitting on furniture other than chairs. And he's not at all uncomfortable attacking Labor via a series of graphics on easels, the latest of which refers to Labor's war on growth, which apparently involves no higher taxes on small business, no higher taxes on investment, on income, on housing or on electricity, before admitting down the bottom that he doesn't know what their tax plans are. Nevertheless, he firmly believes that
Bill Shorten has declared war on business, and as a result, he's declared war on growth.
a war on both business and growth is a big call, and fighting on two fronts is always difficult. Just ask Napoleon.
Was it? Yeah.
Yes, a great emperor. Mike Svengali, you're an undecided voter from Western Sydney that both parties are bending over backwards to look comfortable with. Can I ask you first, how old is your rat?
6.
And secondly, your views on negative gearing.
Well, I used to be a Labor man all my life and proud of it. Aspirational middle class, that I was. Pulled myself up by my parents' bootstraps and got them to go guarantor on my first home loan. Didn't know much about negative gearing back then, did I? No, I didn't. But the lady who consolidates my debts told me it was the only way I could avoid paying too much to the ex-wife and kids and still self-manage what's left of my super fund.
Finally, a question for the audience. Does anyone understand how the super changes will affect transitional retirees?
Yes!
And if you'd like to talk to Casper about your superannuation or indeed anything, I'd be very surprised. Still to come later in the week.
I'm going to the Never Never, and when I get back, they'll be sorry I ever did.
You can't leave. The containment unit needs you.
Can't or won't.
Once this is all over, you'll go back to your people and so will I. But until then, we need to stick together. Always.
My mother always said that magic realism on Wednesday doesn't pay the bills on Thursday.
She sounds like a bitch.
To siphon some of that funding into our own projects. Another period drama. Or something featuring Marta Dusseldorf. Can't you use your psychic powers to bring him back to life? I told you before, Tia, it only works when I'm pregnant.
Refugees are rising up against their forcible removal. I have to get to the zone.
Put down your weapons. They are useless against the sub-android mind control.
Ancient mythology, Billy. Can't make that shit up.
Susie, did the medical report on that giant creature they found floating off the coast come in? The one with the 12 arms?
Cindy checked the DNA, Lieutenant. It's not human.
Too clever man, 0.5. Not really made for an Australian audience.
Well, hello, welcome back. Back in April, Bill Shorten had a lot to say about the Fair Work Commission's then forthcoming ruling on Sunday penalty rates. He said that if elected, he'd accept the recommendations, but now he says this.
The Fair Work Commission, though, says we should cut penalty rates. Will you accept that?
They're not going to.
Well, what if it does?
Well, sorry. You know, what if alien life makes contact with Earth?
Yes. Now, it's an important qualification. Labor will accept the Fair Work Commission's decision on Sunday penalty rates if they remain unchanged, which they will unless aliens make contact with the Earth. How likely is that, UFO enthusiast Crane Girdle?
It all depends on the alien species making contact with us, Shaun. I mean, Bill's assuming that they would be prepared to work Sundays for lower rates than us humans. Now, where your alien is benign in nature, like your Klatus or your Starmans or your ETs, or perhaps those childlike creatures at the climax of CE3K, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Well, then I think we should all really start to worry. Yes. But your more warlike visitors, like your Predator or your Blobs or your stomach-bursting aliens or your Triffids or your Deadly Spawns or your General Zods or your Mothras or your brains from the planet Saros would probably kick up an almighty stink.
Well, hang on. Mothra's not from outer space.
Well, no, but she is of divine origin, Shaun, and her two tiny humanoid companions are known as Shubijin, are certainly not of this realm.
Yes. Yeah, but Mothra's hardly going to be making coffees on Lygon Street Sunday afternoon.
Not for less than $15 an hour, he won't.
Isn't Mothra a girl?
No, she's a moth. A giant one. Would you like me to do a song for you, Shaun?
No, I'm good. Something that's very apparent, though, from page 2 of Labor's 10-year economic plan is that Bill Shorten has a lovely smile. He looks like a man who enjoys a joke. Not one of his zingers, obviously, but then who does? But he does seem like the sort of guy who'd engage in the sort of jokey blokiness that passes for actually being amusing in this country. Like when you go into the butcher's and he says, "Oh, here's trouble." Or when the lady at the pasty shop, you ask how she is and she says, "Oh, no use complaining, no one will listen." To give you a more concrete example, when you climb aboard the Labor campaign bus and Bill says,
"Welcome everybody to the Bill bus."
You see what I mean? That sort of meaningless repartee that wastes your time and mental energy processing it, but isn't quite annoying enough to justify reaching out and trying to strangle him. Anyway, because I'm interested in comedy, I don't know if you remember, but I used to be Nobby Doldrums on Full Frontal. I thought I'd try and analyse why he thought Welcome to the Bill bus was worth saying in the first place. I mean, yes, it's 2 consecutive words starting with the same letter, so clearly he's targeting that big pro-alliteration demographic in Western Sydney. And then I thought maybe he was going to say Welcome to the Shorten bus, which sounds a bit more dignified, but as he started to say the sentence, he suddenly realised that Shorten bus would sound too much like the film Short Bus, which, as a film about orgies featuring actual explicit penetrative sex, he thought might not play well in middle Australia. So he switched to Bill at the last minute, something he thinks you'll do on July 2nd. Just a theory, what do you think? Send your entries to Shaun, you're completely overthinking it, care of the ABC, etc. And you could be in the running to win the Tiki-Toki Fullerton alarm clock with all the features you need to ensure you'll never miss another episode of The Business on ABC News 24, including buzzer, chimes, radio static, whistle, shrieking and a snooze button for when Marcus Padley's on. Available from the ABC shop online or out the back of Elise Morgan's ute.
This week on Four Corners, a farmer's life. A look at what it takes to run an Australian farm, rain, hail or shine, through the eyes of those who do it every day. That's Four Corners, Monday, 8:30.
Well, coming up a little later on in sport. Well, may as well do it now, I suppose. The International Tennis Federation has placed a 2-year ban on former world #1 Maria Sharapova after testing positive to the drug meldonium. Now, putting to one side the shock of a Russian athlete using performance-enhancing substances, the 2-year ban will result in Sharapova's ranking plummeting hundreds of places to levels still above most Australian women's tennis players. But what do we know about the drug meldonium? No, that's a melodica. That's a harmonium. I want a meldonium. Am I going to have to come up there? Thank you. Chunketta Tung, you've taken meldonium for many years and clearly you're not an athlete. What do you take the drug for, an idiot? Sorry, what do you take the drug for?
Yes, Shaun, I just work in abattoir admin, but I take meldonium for ischemia, which is a condition where there is insufficient blood flow to organs like the heart.
And what does the drug do exactly?
Well, it expands the arteries, which increases the flow of blood and oxygen around the body.
Are there any side effects?
Not that I've encountered, Shaun.
And if you or anyone you know needs help with meldonium abuse issues, you can call the Meldonium Helpline on 1800... Well, the Liberal member for the WA seat of Canning, former SAS member Andrew Hastie, looks like delivering on his campaign promise of not being another politician. He's already not another soldier, having successfully been sacked from the Army Reserve for refusing to remove images of himself in army camouflage from campaign materials. Labor candidate from Brisbane, Pat O'Neill, faced similar censure from the ADF over his billboard having to take it down because ADF members are banned from taking part in political activities while dressed in camouflage, particularly in such highly visible advertising. Surely, though, there's no problem with the soldier being seen wearing camouflage because being camouflaged, you wouldn't be able to see him in the first place. And if the camouflage is highly visible, I would definitely be taking it back to the quartermaster. Right, Joint Chief of Staff, Vice Rear, Cabin Boys at Bobo Gargle, conspicuous in battle ribbon with clasp and bar?
Well, Shaun, if you're asking me whether the Army has acted in a hasty fashion or Hastie has acted in an Army fashion, then I would say now is not the time for clever epigrams.
Well, it's just as well.
For is it better to die on one's feet than live on one's own eels? But, Shaun, I'm just an apolitical Navy man. Or woman, let's not be sexist about this. Like our PM, I'm a feminist. I make no distinction between men or women. Guys, girls, they're all the same to me.
But why the fuss about a few billboards?
Appearing in uniform on a poster might give the impression that the ADF was taking sides, and we have to remain impartial.
On the fence?
Well, not on defence, obviously. We have to take sides when we're fighting. I mean, good God, can you imagine helping the Syrian government forces with air support and dropping weapons to the PKK while we're up there? Actually, I think that is what we're doing. I mean, obviously, we've been engaged in toppling dictators in other countries, but our regime change services are strictly for international markets, like Foster's and Bindi Irwin.
What about Andrew Hastie's point that the former Defence Chief David Morrison politicised the ADF when he demanded women be treated equally?
Well, Shaun, gender politics is not a political issue. I'm not about to make it one. Like our PM, I want to smash that glass ceiling as much as the next man, or at least put a crack in it.
And if you can't contain the crack in it?
Well, then... I'll release the crack in it!
Actually, speaking of zombies, and that's not a line you often hear on a news programme.
Actually, speaking of zombies...
My mistake. There's been a lot of talk about zombies lately, be they zombie measures, zombie U-turns or zombie cuts, which actually can be quite nasty. But Greens leader Richard Di Natale has taken things too far. Are you listening to this?
Yeah. It's very interesting, Shaun.
Thank you. The senator has accused Labor of resurrecting the zombie of Tony Abbott. Now, you can't resurrect a zombie, can you? A zombie is already, by its very nature, resurrected. You kill a zombie by destroying its brain. That's it. It can't come back to life after coming back to life once its brain has been destroyed.
What about Kevin Rudd?
That's a very good point.
Shut up and stop eating with your mouth full. Still to come later in the week.
We believe that it is
One of our greatest prime ministers as seen through the eyes of another.
Oh yes, so I had the great pleasure of meeting Sir Robert Menzies on several occasions. We first met at a young Liberals ball. I was dancing with Jeanette and he cut in. And anyways, as we waltzed together, he told me of his plan to force conscription on the young men of Australia and plunge our country into an unwinnable war with Vietnam. Now, privately, I felt this was the act of an unhinged lunatic, obsessed with making up for his own cowardice back in 1939. But I kept my own counsel and we had a very wonderful evening. He and Dame Patty invited us back to their place for what in the 60s was called a freak-out. Milo laced with LSD. I don't remember much of it, to be honest, although I do have a vague memory of snorting cocaine off Wendy Whiteley's naked back. By the morning, I was a fully signed-up member of the Liberal Party. So it ended well.
Welcome back. Radical cleric Cardinal George Pell turned 75 last week, and according to ancient tradition of honouring and obeying everything else in the Catholic Church just because it's old, George must tender his resignation, although the Pope doesn't have to accept it. In fact, the resignation is just for show, isn't it, Bishop Straitman? There's no way George will leave the Vatican, as his response to the summons to appear at the Royal Commission proved.
Shaun, His Most Holy and Invisible at the Hearing, Pell, treats his role as Vatican, my budget consultant, very seriously, as indeed he does all aspects of his posting here.
No, you put the trousers back on the horse. Oh, hello. Here, George wants to cut his cake now. He says the girl's suffocating in there. Have you seen his sterling silver sword?
I'm doing an interview. Get out.
Oh, I know. Oh! So the Cardinal is celebrating his birthday, is he?
Oh, His Magnificence does not bother himself with such mortal trifles, Shaun. He is, even as we speak, in his vestibule composing his humble letter of resignation to the Pontiff.
No, he's already done it. See, here it is. Pretend letter of resignation, not to be taken seriously.
I told you to get out.
Oh, matron, please. Well, surely you must be doing something for his birthday.
Well, we all chipped in and bought a divinity a remaindered Pope Benedict snow globe, a modest gift for a modest man.
Yes, I know. I wanted to get a bejeweled carriage pulled by nude golden robots that haven't been invented yet, so we can go to the toilet in style. But she says no, it's too ostentatious. Oh, look at the size of that thing. Oh, yeah, no. Well, not coming up because Chase's election desk is on next. Brainwashed citizens indulge dictators' insane fancies, and much-loved Queen celebrated by her people. Now, before we go, just another couple of observations about Labor's 10-year plan, because I think the story of Labor's economic plan is told more in the imagery they've used than the words. For example, the front cover. Notice that someone else has the plans and not Bill. And by the looks of him, he's probably from the CFMEU, so the 10-year plan could well take 15 years and cost twice as much as they originally quoted. The other thing I noticed was how similar it is to the Coalition's Real Solutions plan of 2013. There's the Real Solutions cover, and this is from the back page of the Labor plan. I mean, apart from the fact that Labor look a lot happier to be working together and don't have enough chairs, they look identical. Right down to the Venetian blinds. If only we could get them in the same room like that. Think how much work would be accomplished. Good night.
Jive, baby.
Oh, matron, please.